Now we're going to welcome in our next live guest. We've got Marilyn Surber joining us to talk a little bit about building a performance culture. Marilyn, thank you for joining us. When we talk about performance, there's a difference between a performance culture and a hustle culture, right? When I think about it, hustle culture is like you'll do anything to get the work done. You'll sacrifice performance in order to hustle. But performance is a little different, right? You're more a little bit focused on results that way.
Absolutely. Performance-based culture is a culture that's incentivizing performance all the way through the entire life cycle of a driver, and in a culture of excellence in every category. And so when we think about driver performance, there's several different metrics that you should be measuring and looking at to make sure that you are breeding that kind of culture, because it's all over the board, right? You have safety performance, which could mean telematics events, accidents, obviously, violations, hours of service, inspections. You've really got all those things that tie into safety performance. So you need to make sure you're looking at all of those individual metrics within side safety. You also have fuel performance. We know that fuel is the second largest cost to a carrier. And so managing a driver's fuel, looking at their fuel performance can really save a lot of money, and really by just making small changes. You also want to be looking at driver wait time, right? We know from data and from surveys that one of the most frustrating things for drivers is when they have long wait times, and especially when they don't understand how to recoup that pay, that accessorial pay. So you always want to make sure you're measuring that. You also have the vehicle performance metrics, because some of those things can definitely be prevented by driver behavior. You have ongoing driver compliance that you have to look at. And then you also have driver satisfaction. So measuring satisfaction through surveys. And so really making sure that you're looking at all of those points, and that your drivers, your entire fleet, and internal people know that that's your culture, that you're measuring all of those things, and you're holding drivers accountable for them, but you're also holding staff accountable for those metrics and how they support drivers in those ways. And then also how are they measuring and being proactive in reacting to those things.
Marilyn, what's the difference here between a performance culture, maybe one that's geared more around, say for its efficiency? Obviously, a lot of the things that you talked about there need to be done or should be done and want to be done in a very short amount of time. At the same time, you don't want to hurry too much at the same time if you're performance-based as well. So how do you marry those two in terms of trying to obviously be a good performer, but also being efficient?
It's a great question, because I think they don't always go hand in hand. But I think if you can set the standard for performance in your organization and say kind of performance first, and then working towards that excellence is going to make you more efficient, right? So if you are measuring those items consistently and coaching drivers and helping them get better in each one of those metrics, then that's going to lead to a more efficient culture. It's also going to help improve your retention rate. So we're starting to see a lot of post-hire data that shows when drivers are safer and they're more fuel efficient, then they stay longer at your company. And so really tying all of those things together just helps you be a better carrier, but it also helps you retain drivers, which is a big deal for all of us. No matter what kind of the driver environment is, we want to make sure we're hanging on to the good drivers that we have. And so measuring drivers and getting them to be safer and more fuel efficient is also going to help your retention efforts.
When I think about fleets that have this excellent performance culture, the very first one that comes to mind is Walmart, right? Walmart drivers are so incredibly happy. They do a really great job on safety. Their retention is on top of the world. And everybody wants to drive for Walmart. Everybody wants that crisp white shirt, right? I think about, me and Grace Sharkey talk about this all the time. Walmart drivers want to be there. They love driving for Walmart. Do you think that this only happens because Walmart is such a big part of the industry and has such its own kind of handle on its transportation sector? And does that exist in fleets when you're trying to now coexist between a shipper and maybe your brokers? Or is it just does that performance culture happen just because your parent company is so focused on your transportation aspect?
So I think that's a great question. I think everybody knows Walmart, and so they've done a great job of making sure. I mean, I was recruiter in 2008, and it was still everybody wanted to work for Walmart. So it's been that culture for a long time. But I do think because they're so large, we know that. But I think internally, not internally, but in the driver community, there's lots of fleets that they know about that are performance-based and excellent fleets that they want to drive for, whether they're small fleets, medium-sized fleets, and other large fleets. So I think it's maybe not as front and center for us that we hear it all the time, but I think drivers definitely hear about it. But I do think that it comes from the top and it comes from every level of your organization. And so if you want to be known for your culture and known for excellence, then it can't just be a one-time deal or you have a small program. It has to be a continuous, consistent commitment to performance that you are talking about all the time. And I think it's important to remember that performance-based culture starts in recruiting. Setting the stage for the culture of your organization starts in the recruiting process. When that driver calls into you, that first interaction they have with your company, they're starting to then make the decisions about how long they're going to stay with your company. Okay, what kind of company is this? They really care about this versus that, based on that first initial interaction with your company. And so I think, to be like the Walmarts of the world, that culture has to, and that performance has to show itself in every aspect on your website, in your recruiters, in your orientation supervisors, in everything that you do from the top down.
Marilyn, so let's say, for instance, you're with an organization that doesn't have, say, for instance, the performance-based criteria, the performance-based outline that you want to follow. What are maybe one or two things you want to do to get started in that direction, at least if you want to start to look at that as the criteria for how you're going to run the business?
That's a great question. So I think the first thing that you can do is take account of the technology you have. There's so much technology now that's available to carriers. And so you likely, you already have an ELD system because that's mandated. And there you likely have an applicant tracking system. And so, if you have a camera system, that's great too. And so take stock of the technology and what tools are available in the technology that you already have. And then I also think one of the things that you can do that's easier to implement kind of right off the bat is start an ongoing training program. And so you can look at your fleet and say, okay, no matter how big your fleet is, you need to be doing ongoing training. And so establish what those metrics are, what you want to train on, and then just start a program. It can be as simple as having a safety meeting at all your terminals a couple of days a week, or sending out a safety message and a fleet-wide message, right? Or assigning a training video. There's lots of technology and lots of resources available, and you probably already have that technology in your business and in your trucks to facilitate it. And so that's what I would do first, is take a look at what you have available to you and get started somewhere.
Marilyn, that's great stuff. Marilyn Surber of Tenstreet, thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to having you on again soon.
Thanks, Bill.
Excellent stuff there from her there.